I don't want the introduction to be anticlimactic, so give a round of applause for Dr. Bell Hooks and Dr. Kevin Powell. Okay. Well, to make a revolution, people must not only struggle against existing institutions, they must make philosophical, spiritual leaps and become more human beings. In order to change, transform the world, they must change and transform themselves. I can remember swearing when I was young that I would not change, because if I changed, I would betray the revolution. And as I've grown older, I've understood I should change, and changing was more honorable than not changing. That's Grace Lee Boggs, social activist, author, philosopher, feminist, who left this earthly existence yesterday peacefully at the age of 100. So please make as much noise as you can for her life and legacy, this phenomenal woman. And if you don't know about her, you have a really amazing research endeavor to undertake tonight. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, staff, students, guests. Do I really need a microphone? I need it? Better with it, without it? Meow. Okay. I humbly and excitedly welcome you all to the second event in this week's Fall 2015 Scholar in Residence program, featuring our venerable Scholar in Residence, Dr. Bell Hooks, and very, very special guest, Kevin Powell. My name is Samuel Sellers, a.k.a. Rabbi Darkside. I'm a hip-hop MC, DJ, human beatboxer, and visiting lecturer here at the New School, teaching a seminar entitled Hip-Hop Pedagogy and Practice. When folks ask me to describe our course, I explain that it's the intersection of critical theory, hip-hop culture, and the elements as pedagogical framework, and the practice of close reading and creating social justice artwork. It's an attempt to realize the classroom as a cipher, a holistically attuned space where transformational energy is exchanged and extended into our lives at large, where we are equipped with the lenses of the conscious upstander. It's also an attempt to synthesize my experiences into curricula, from immersion in the global countercultural community of hip-hop, to transitioning from classroom teacher to arts educator, to citizen ambassador, to navigating the music entertainment industry, all while delving deep into a spiritual exploration essential to my personal growth as an empathetic ally, self-aware white male, revolutionary liberatory artist educator, musicologist, and dope rapper. So, it is with extreme joy and slight jitters that I introduce these two world-shaking human beings, two personal heroes of mine who embody renaissance, revolution, and liberation in their constantly evolving, multidimensional means of engaging the world. The work and words of both Bell Hooks and Kevin Powell enter my life ablaze with epiphany, encountering thinkers and mobilizers who not only eloquently articulate their world vision and plan of action, but bring them to life through direct service and civic engagement is the definition of inspiration. Bell Hooks is an author, activist, feminist, and scholar in residence at the New School. In building the literary foundation for introducing critical theory to New School students, the books of Bell Hooks gave solid state to nebulous concepts I've striven to align to the tenets of hip-hop culture. The principles of Africa Bambaataa, Sir Ken Robinson, RS1, Tibetan Buddhist meditation, while packaging them palatably and comprehensively for young people new to the idea of education as an arena of academic study. The answer shouldn't be as simple as two words, but they are. Bell Hooks. In Teaching Community, Dr. Hooks writes, "We need mass-based political movements calling citizens of this nation to uphold democracy and the rights of everyone to be educated and to work on behalf of ending domination in all its forms, to work for justice, changing our educational system so that schooling is not the site where students are indoctrinated to support imperialist, white supremacist, capitalist patriarchy or any ideology, but rather where they learn to open their minds to engage in rigorous study and to think critically." This is one of the very first quotes my class encountered and examined this year, and it remains at the front of my notebook as a daily mantra. Bell Hooks leaves no realm of existence unexamined, no teaching or learning opportunity unexplored. On behalf of the New School, it is my sincere honor to welcome you back and thank you for sharing with us one of these learning moments. An earmark of the hip-hop genius is a multifaceted, elastic, interdisciplinary skill set that can be applied to the world in innovative, pointed ways. Kevin Powell is a writer, political activist, public speaker, humanitarian, and, I'm convinced, a hip-hop secret agent. Sure you can. That's why I get keep on the low. That's the secret part of it. In exploring hip-hop pedagogical practices, it's imperative to note that the parameters of the elements do not end with emceeing, DJing, breakdancing, graffiti writing, beatboxing, or music production. Kevin has modeled, in fact pioneered, the ways in which one can carry the hip-hop mindset and skill set into arenas most in need of progressive, empowering, unifying ideas and actions. In an effort to reclaim our humanity, let us find new motivation for living by opening our minds to broader concepts of spirituality. Can you imagine a concept like this woven into the life and platform of a political candidate? Stop imagining, because that's been Kevin Powell. From electoral politics to symposiums, major news networks to published pages, Mr. Powell is the epitome of the hip-hop genius. And his next book, The Education of Kevin Powell, A Boy's Journey into Manhood, drops on November 3rd. But you can pre-order it right now on Amazon, or maybe get a copy today if you're lucky. And it is my great honor to welcome you here today as well, sir. Thank you. Gentle reminder, everybody, please silence your phones or put them on vibrate. But also, please use them to spread the word about all the magic that's happening here this week with Bell Hooks Scholar in Residency events. So if you're going to do so, hashtag photos, quotes, anything with the hashtag Bell Hooks TNS. That's hashtag.
In the back, if you want to come and sit up front, feel free to do so. We want you to be comfortable. Oh.
That seat's taken, actually. Yeah.
Okay. Finally, as we turn the conversation over to our guests, I will say Eugene Lang College is a place where scholarship and academic rigor meet artistic and intellectual freedom. Dr. Hook's residency at the college embodies this spirit, and we are proud to host these critical dialogues. And Lang is relentlessly relevant, always rigorous, and a place where everyone has a voice in the discussion. So with that in mind, we are proud to host this dialogue. So ladies and gentlemen, please, a big round of applause for Dr. Bell Hooks and Dr. Kevin Powell as they discuss Black masculinity.
Thank you all for being here. Kevin, of course, had the anxiety.
Who's
going to come at 4 o'clock?
I did.
And so thank you for coming and welcome. Our topic really is to talk about Black masculinity, because Black masculinity has just been put on the screen of America. Whether we're talking about Ta-Nehisi Coates or Ferguson or any number of other things, there is, I would say, the pretense that this culture, this imperialist, white supremacist, capitalist patriarchy cares about the lives of Black men. And I see nothing that has changed in a way that suggests that. So when Kevin sent me the galleys of his book, I've always been moved by Kevin's willingness to speak honestly and openly about his struggles as a Black male, and to speak about violence, both familial violence, his violence, and the violence of others. So I'm really happy about this book, and I think that everybody should read it. I think it's a book that really speaks to why Black males have rage, and why people struggle to try to deal with that rage.
Wow. Well, good afternoon, everyone, first of all. Good afternoon. How are you all doing? All right. I just want to say, first of all, just thank God for this opportunity, as I always say, Belle. And I just want to thank you and she knows how I feel privately, but publicly, I just want to say this. I was introduced to Dr. Bell Hooks' work in the early 1990s by women who went to the great HBCU, Historically Black College, Spelman College in Atlanta, Georgia. I don't know if you know that. There was a lot of us who were involved in various kinds of student and youth leadership movements, and every generation deals inevitably with this issue of patriarchy and sexism. And I remember folks saying to me, women saying to me, well, this is someone you need to read. It was you and Pearl Cleage, actually, you know. But Bell's work especially grabbed me. I will be honest, as a man, as a heterosexual man, at first I was like, oh no, I can't read this, you know. But I opened my mind up over time.
Were you still a violent man then?
I was an angry Negro, yes ma'am, in many ways. And what you did with your work was challenge me to deconstruct where I came from, you know, which I thought was important. And I need to say this, especially you all who are college students, either here or somewhere else, you should not, especially the males here, you should not go through 4 years of college like I did, and you barely read any women writers at all. The only thing I read was Zora Neale Hurston's Their Eyes Are Watching God, because I was required in a seminar that was connected to Richard Wright. And I think that's tragic when we don't learn about the contributions of half the world's population. And so here I was, raised by a single mother and my aunts and my grandmother, all women around me, all black women around me, all the stories of women around me, but I realized how little I actually knew about the struggles of women and girls in this world, specifically black women and girls, you know. So I just want to publicly thank you, because it was the beginning of a re-education. And that's part of the reason why I named this book The Education of Kevin Powell, because I feel like part of the issue with us as men, and this is not just black men, this is white men, Latino men, Asian men, all men in this society and on this planet. We don't realize how deeply awash we are in patriarchy, sexism, misogyny, homophobia.
Give the boy some, you know he's right.
We just don't know. And for me, the work since that discovery of you and other folks, like I said, like Pearl Cleage and Evans and other folks like that, is to really make a commitment, even though it's been difficult at times, as I outlined in the book, because it literally goes from age 3 to my 40s where I'm at now. But the first thing is for us to be aware, gentlemen, aware of these backwards definitions of manhood that we have. You can't even talk about these mass shootings in this country to me without talking about these destructive definitions of manhood. 93% of these cases, most of the cases of mass shootings are males shooting guns. Most of the cases you see of public figures getting in trouble for some sort of sexual abuse, sexual misconduct, are male public figures. And you can go on and on with all the statistics. You look at all the athletes that have gotten in trouble the last few years. And so I think about all these things as I wrote this book, but also I wish that there were some books out there when I was a lot younger, and that's part of the reason why I wrote this the way I did, because I didn't just want to talk about my own journey, but also acknowledge, you know, you, but also some of the males that were impactful in my life along the way.
I mean, one thing that was really hard for me when I've known Kevin, he's been like, you know, a son kind of, and I didn't realize how hard his childhood had been until I read the book, The Poverty, the Violence. And that's one thing that I think it makes the book so worthwhile to read, because we look at Kevin now, we look at him, you know, when he's working at Vive and places like that, and we didn't have any understanding of what he went through. And I don't know if you followed The Real World or any of that.
That little thing?
You know, Kevin was kind of framed as an angry, violent black man. But, I mean, when I read his story, basically, and you know, you have to correct me if you think I'm wrong, but Kevin's mom was so violent towards him. I mean, he was violent towards her, too, in a different way. I mean, when you did all that acting out bullshit where she felt that she had to check you.
Yes, Mother Bell, yes.
That was like forcing her to assume a kind of patriarchal stance with you. Because, like so many black mothers, she was afraid.
Yeah.
She was afraid that if she didn't get this boy and his rage under control, I mean, how many times do we hear that? How many times do we read about black mothers feeling that they have to tamp down black males so that their rage won't destroy them?
Yeah, yeah. Wow. I need to say this too. The book is out October 27th. We actually pushed it up. I want to acknowledge my editor, Rakesh Patel, who's here from Atria Books, Simon & Schuster, and thank you for being here. This is actually the first time I'm talking about this book in public. And so if I get a little emotional.
We'll let you do it.
Okay. You know what I'm saying? But, you know, it's interesting. Belle actually talked about my mother. The book is dedicated to my mother. I said that she's the first teacher, the first leader I ever met in my life. I just need to say that because it's important. I did an interview a couple weeks ago with a publication. I won't say the name of the publication, but she started talking about abuse a lot, you know, and wanting me to say, well, Kevin, weren't you the victim of child abuse? And let me say it like this. My mother was born in the South, in South Carolina, in the 1940s. She was a poor black woman born in the American South in the 1940s. She was the product of the vicious racism of this country at that time. I don't think there's anything more abusive than the world that created her. And so for me, part of the challenge for the book, I could easily start with my own life, but when you read the book, and I hope you all do read the book, I feel it's critical that I go back and lay out, here's what my mother went through in the American South. Here's what my family went through. Learning that, you know, over the last 10 years, my great-grandfather, who had the audacity to own 400 acres of land in the American South, actually was killed by some white men in that community because he owned that land and did not want to give up that land. You know, my grandfather, one of his sons, was old enough to remember that he was a very angry black man. In fact, he did not like white people because he remembered viscerally what happened to his father, my great-grandfather. And so, you know, to me, when I think about the anger of our relatives, families from generation to generation, I always ask myself a question: what did she or he actually survive? What did they go through? You know, and the reality is, you know, I've been blessed to have bell hooks and Gloria Steinem and Eve Ensler and years of therapy and Reiki healing and yoga and meditation and all kinds of stuff. Dr. Phil and Oprah, y'all know what I'm saying. Whatever you do.
But I don't know what you're saying. Are you trying to say that if people have suffered traumatically themselves,
yeah,
and then they inflict suffering on others, what? Should we forgive? Should we understand? What are you saying?
I think we should understand, and I think we should forgive.
All
Now,
right.
Does it take a long time to forgive? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Because one of the things I talk about in the book, and I don't want to give away the stories, but, you know, Belle is right, there's violence. And anyone who grows up in my community, who grew up in my community as a black person, you know, we talk about spirit of rod, spoil the child. You know, if you are a football fan, you know, Adrian Peterson got in trouble about a year ago for, quote unquote, beating his son. But Belle's right, in the context of some of our communities, you know, that is actually a way of protecting us. If you're not good inside of here, if you're not good in this household, we don't know what's going to happen to you outside of this household. Now, the tragic part of it, in my opinion, Belle, is that it oftentimes teaches us that violence is the solution for all conflicts.
Well, it also suggests that we can only embrace the system and use it in our household. That I mean, one of the things that I most admire about our ancestors was their capacity to develop oppositional thinking. Yeah. Well, as black people like my parents became more Christian, they dropped oppositional thinking. No more reading of dreams, no more what have you, no more going to the person who's a psychic, because Christianity really attacked all of that in the freed slaves and their ancestors. So it's the internalization of the, I can remember vividly my mother saying to me, "You're mine and I'll kill you if I want to." I mean, imagine that kind of trauma on a child where this person that is really the person who cares for me the most. Yeah. But she was also the person who was meanest. Yeah. In trying to keep me in line, but trying to keep me in line for some system. Yeah. That was not a system that affirmed her or any of us. Yeah. And that's because I'm a first generation of folks, at least where I grew up in Jersey City. You know, here we are, born and raised in the ghetto. This is where I'm from. You know, all I knew was poverty. But at the same time, there's an anecdote in the book where my mother and I encounter an older white woman when we're out, and I noticed that my mother's entire demeanor changes. She goes from, you know, this strong black woman to basically bowing down to this white woman.
You know, and so it's like this duality, this schizophrenia. And I'm looking at this, and then the white sister said something to the effect that I was a cute little boy. And when she walked away, my mother said to me, if the white person says that, then it must be true. And I want us to think about that for a second. But on top of that, you know, I'm being told that I have to be an A student, which I was because my mother didn't tolerate bad grades. I never could miss school. It didn't matter if you were sick or not. And so there was these incredibly high standards. But at the same time, I talk about, in the book, the lack of intimacy, the lack of I love yous and hugs and things like that. And for me, Belle, when I was writing this book, I thought about memoirs that I wrote. Like, I love Malcolm X. But when I think about it, you know, Malcolm never talks about how those traumas really deeply affected him. I love Richard Wright's Black Boy, but I think about the fact that you get a sense that he had some serious problems with his mother and his grandmother and his aunt. But I'm like, do you really contextualize where this is going? And did you ever really heal from this? And so that's where I wanted to be different with this book. And then when we talk about black masculinity, you know, it's very easy to say, you know, what you're against. And it's very easy to say you're against the system and, you know, that kind of stuff. But I'm like, are we willing to go inside? Because I think the society doesn't allow or teach us or encourage us. And even in our own black community, a lot of so-called black male leaders, they don't talk about stuff.
Well, they certainly don't want to talk about gender. No. And whether we're talking Cornel West, or who is my bud and who has my heart, but I'm always on him about giving some loose lip service to gender, you know, but not really going down in the critique of patriarchy.
Right.
So that I think that is wounding to us. I want to say, I never want people to think that we're in any way trying to suggest that black men are more patriarchal than other groups of men. I'm obsessed with evangelical Christianity, and so I read lots of books about evangelical Christianity, and I just finished reading Oral Roberts, the biography of Oral Roberts by his daughter, and she talks about how he completely ignored her. She was just not relevant to him. And she describes this very poignant scene of where she gets to be a teenager and she just wants to go on one of those revivals with him. And her mom finally agrees, and she's in the hotel room with the connecting door, and she's ecstatic. Well, he forgets all about her. He goes on to the tent meeting and doesn't even, send anybody else. It's just like she didn't exist. And she had her little pocket money, and she took a taxi herself. And what I liked about her book was the constant honesty about no matter how many people he healed, no matter how charismatic he was as a preacher to others, his level of emotional abandonment of her was incredible. And so she even says that people have said to her, well, why did you write the book? You didn't really know him. And she was like, are you kidding? I wanted his love more than anything. And so I watched him every day. I observed him. I hung on his every word because I just thought if I studied him enough, I would find a way in. And I mean, there's just so many women who, as girls, didn't get the father contact. I think that I just finished reading. I try to read a nonfiction book a day. I've been trying to stop myself because my ego's getting attached to that. But another book that I just finished was Wayne Dyer's book. I Can See Clearly Now. And those of you who don't know, he died recently, self-help guru. He talks about the fact that his father, he never met his father. Yeah. And that was the core abandonment of his life. And that he spent all of his life hungering to meet the father, to get in touch with the father. And, we could go on and on about black males and father abandonment, both the present father who emotionally abandons you, but the absent father who also doesn't seek or desire to know you. I mean, I think we don't have enough memoirs by black men. I think there are so many stories black men have to tell us, so much pain that black men haven't been able to speak. And especially this pain about the father. I was raised in a home with 5 sisters and my brother. And I was very close to my brother, and my father used to say, Glory, your brother ain't worth a nickel. And I used to think about him as he entered his adulthood, drug addiction, the whole works. what it must have been like for him to hear every day some completely disparaging statement about himself, that you're not worth a nickel. And that sense, that internalization of lack of value. And that's what disturbs me. Like, I'm disturbed by the moniker Black Lives Matter, because I think, well, who are we trying to convince? What black person doesn't believe that their life matters? I mean, what we know is it's the imperialist, white, supremacist, capitalist patriarchy that doesn't value our lives. And doesn't seem to be, I don't care how much we march at Ferguson or march for Trayvon Martin, that system is no closer to valuing our lives than it was before these incidents. I was asking Kevin, do you think that if we took away all the police brutality against black men, would black men be saved? Would black men be able to self-actualize? Is it really police brutality that is stealing the lives of black males? I mean, I tell Kevin all the time, because Kevin talks in his book about how important learning how to read was to him. Malcolm X, I mean, think about how many black men have come to power and consciousness in prison, because it's the first time in their lives that they've been able to be still and be alone. And that moment of confronting the self, of having to look at your own actions, not blaming someone else. And we really, I mean, that's one of the reasons I treasure Malcolm, because I felt he was always engaged in self-reflection. You know, why do I feel this way? What is driving me? We didn't see that same kind of self-reflection in Martin Luther King, but we certainly saw the same father dominance in the way King's dad treated him. Not father love, but father dominance. I want you to live a certain way. I want you to be a certain way. And I mean, and I'm all for us talking about the degree to which womanizing men, which we know King was, that the womanizing for many black men is so tied to the void. Like, I'm a big fan of this new book, Unhooked. It's not that new, but it's by David Wolverston. But he talks about addiction as so tied to that spiritual void that you're trying to fill. And we don't want to talk about black men who are fucking a lot as a lot of different people, betraying as, you know, caught in a void. You know, I mean, I can tell you that I gave a talk when I wrote We Real Cool, Black Men and Masculinity, and I said that a lot of womanizing black men are boys that have been sexually abused and have no boundaries. Black men stood up, turned their backs. They were very angry that I said that. But I got a lot of letters from black males saying, you know, this is opening a door. Because what am I seeking? You know?
Wow.
Well, he writes about his own little womanizing tendencies.
Oh, I do.
And that he had good women in his life.
That I pushed away.
That he emotionally wounded and pushed away.
Yeah. There's so many things I want to respond to. I'm going to try to remember as much of it as possible. One, the fatherhood piece. It's profound for me now.
How old are you?
Old enough.
Old enough. Don't even try it. How old are you?
It's in the book. I'm in my 40s. I'm holding on to my 40s for now. Generation X proud. But it's deep for me, Belle, to I'll give you an example. There's a young man that I really admire. We're not talking a young black man. We're talking about black men, males for a second. I saw him at an event a year ago. Mahogany, you were there actually. And I heard him, he had a poem, knock, 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 not my mother and father. And it was so jarring because I saw myself at 20 years old. I had written the same things, you know what I mean, in my poems, in my essays, etc. And I immediately gave that young man a copy of my poetry book. I embraced him, and I talked with him as much as I could. But I realized all that hurt from his own father. And just to put this in context, he says it publicly, so I'm not putting him on blast. His father gave his mother AIDS. This is what he's dealing with. What I was dealing with coming up, my mother gets pregnant by my father. He's at least 11, 12 years older than her. All these lies about I love you, going to get married, stuff like that. My mother has to take herself to the hospital to give birth to me. He's nowhere to be found. I saw him maybe 2 or 3 times when I was coming up until I was 8 years old. You know, I'm growing up in the 70s, Belle, and I talk about it in the book. I'm watching the Brady Bunch and the courtship of Eddie's father, and, you know, when Good Times did have a father the first 2 seasons, you know, until they pushed him off, you know, the show, which is a whole nother conversation about black male fathers not even being on TV. At 8 years old, my mother took me to the, we didn't even have a telephone. This is when we talk about poverty, people always say to go overseas to go do some poverty work. I mean, y'all need to come to Brooklyn. Y'all need to, anywhere in New York, East Oakland, New Orleans, there's poverty all over this country, massive poverty. And then people say crazy stuff, Belle, like, well, it's not as bad as it overseas. Well, I didn't get on a plane until I was 24 years old, so how the heck would I know what it's like overseas? Most folks don't travel who are poor because we ain't got no money. You know what I'm saying? So it's ridiculous when people make those kind of comparisons. My mother was, back in those times, Belle, she wasn't going to take him for child support. She was just like, can you help us? Can you help us? Can you help us? And my father was like, on the phone, and I'm standing there next to my mother, you a liar. He ain't my son. And it's funny that you said what you said about your father, saying that your son is not, your brother's not worth a nickel. In the book, I said that my father said to my mother, I'm not going to give you a near nickel for him ever again, and hung up the phone to my mother. Last time I ever talked to him, you know. I felt that father hole forever. Now, I want y'all to think about this. We're talking about black men for a second, and black boys. I did not have a single positive black male image in my life for the first 18 years of my life. Not one. Some people are like, what about your coaches? Nah, I played baseball. They like, hit the ball and run, just run and jump. That's what we did. All those movies you see, those Disney movies about these coaches who are involved in their lives, that doesn't really exist a lot of times. That's like in a few cases. It wasn't until I got to college that I first started to engage older black men. And I didn't even know what the word mentor meant. You know what I mean? And I'll be honest with y'all, the first mentor I had was a dead black man, and his name was Malcolm X, and I read his autobiography at 18. And what I remember, and I say it in the book, I didn't even know who Malcolm X was. I went to the so-called best schools in Jersey City, and this is why I said the education of Kevin Powell, because the educational system is BS and miseducates all of us. If you don't learn about the contributions of all people to this country equally, no matter what their background, you've been grossly miseducated. I don't care who you are. You've been grossly miseducated. I had no idea that Malcolm X existed. I had no idea about all the jazz figures he talks about in the book. So I'm reading this autobiography. I'm getting this astounding education about this black man. And then I go with him to prison, as Belle said, and everything that Malcolm said he read, I would underline, and I started reading it too. When Malcolm said that he always carried a watch because he wanted to be, I've worn a watch my entire adult life because of Malcolm X. Then I get to the end of the book, and I realize this man gets killed. And they wanted this black man so dead because he was such a threat. They put 15 to 20 bullets in him. And I remember closing the book, Belle, and I cried as if I knew Malcolm. You know what I mean? Because he really represented, in that book, the first black male father figure.
It's interesting because my grandfather, my mother's father, was a positive male figure, and my dad hated him. He dogged him out. He was a pussy. He was a this. He was a that. He was not a good enough man because he was peaceful. That was what I most remember about my daddy, guys, how peaceful he was and how good he always was, that he never had a harsh word to say. My father thought, that's weak.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. It's the definitions of manhood that I got as a so-called straight or heterosexual male growing up, you had to be violent, you had to be aggressive, you had to be hard, men didn't cry, you know, and there was something wrong with you if you didn't fight, and it was a kind of policing going on. And it ain't just black males, again, it was all the males. Like,
well, our culture is constantly policing boys.
Exactly.
We don't love boys. Don't let anybody fool you into thinking we are a culture that love boys.
And what you said before we started, patriarchy, sexism hurts us as much as it hurts women, just in different ways. Because it's almost like it's a male prison that we're stuck in. We don't realize you're in this box and you can't be anything outside of that box. And that's what I felt. You know, I was confused. You know, and what I did in college, I joined black male groups, but they were rooted, as you said, in patriarchy and sexism. We were talking about, you know, empowerment of the community, but we were only talking about half the race. It had nothing to do with black women.
Or even what you think about how, like, white people are so enamored of Ta-Nehisi Coates' book. You won't find anything in his book about gender, about teaching his son to see women differently.
Yeah.
And it's all about this whole idea that, you know, and everybody's so happy. The black man is speaking to his son. The black man is reaching out to his son. And, you know, and that's just another kind of bullshit. I said this book is very much written in Atlantic Monthly and New Yorker speak. And I don't know what young black men is reaching out to, but it's reaching out to a fictive black male, not the reality of young black men for whom a certain kind of language isn't going to draw them in. I mean, I think you have to be true to who you say your audience is. Is it a letter to your son because you want him to understand and other black boys to understand, or is it a letter to white people so that you can let them know you're not like those other trifling Negroes that don't have shit to say to their sons? You know, and I want to say this. Cornel West critiqued the book, and his critique is well taken, but people got mad because they didn't like the way that he critiqued it. And Cornel has been getting a lot of hits for, you know, shooting off his mouth. I mean, do we need to know Cornel saying Obama is a niggerizing president? No, we don't. But if people get beyond that statement to the critical meat of what Cornel says, there is nothing he's saying about Obama that is not a sincere critique. It's the way he frames it. But why have we created Cornel now? We used to admire Cornel.
He was Ta-Nehisi Coates 20 years ago. People forget that.
I'm not even going to let you go there because he was much more aware.
Okay.
You know.
Okay.
I mean, he was on the left, and he was dissident.
I'm talking about popularity.
Okay, I'm going to make but my point is that Cornel has been the symbol for us of a black man on the left, a black man being true to everyday people. And I don't think it's any accident that all of a sudden people are attacking him. People be calling me saying, Bill, your friend Cornel is crazy. You need to put a muzzle on him. And it's just interesting to me that switch from people feeling Cornel is someone we should listen to and learn from to a kind of hatred because he's not performing as...
that's the key word.
Yes,
that's
as
the key
people
word.
feel he should perform. I was on the Vineyard this summer and saw the Baldwin film, which really annoyed me, the reissued Baldwin film where Maya Angelou is reading throughout. Skip says the same critique of Coates and Toni Morrison that Cornel said, but nobody's booing him. Nobody's challenging him.
Right.
It's like, oh, this is reasoned and rational. It's not, wow, Cornel West. So I think that that is an interesting relationship between what happens if black men are emotional.
Yeah.
I mean, I had just had my birthday, and I always have people come over and read a poem. This year was poems by women, and one of the poems was When God Says Yes, and it starts with, I asked God if it was okay to be melodramatic, and God said yes. But really, who have we allowed other than the black preacher to have an emotional voice?
It's my gosh.
I mean, isn't that why hip-hop has had such an interesting relationship? Because it was indeed, in its inception, a radical, emotional voice.
That's right.
Not just a voice.
A radical voice.
I urge you to read Imani Perry's Prophets in the Hood about hip-hop.
Yeah.
And the whole question of how does hip-hop get transformed from being that emotional voice of black masculinity that can talk about a range of emotionalities and feelings to the imperialist, white supremacist, capitalist, patriarchal hip-hop.
Right.
you know?
Right. I'm thinking about a lot of stuff. Since you brought up MTV, I'm going to go there. You know.
Oh, yeah, put the blame on the woman.
No. No,
you know,
Belle.
I'm just joking. I can take the heat.
That's all right. I know you can. No.
As my topic for Friday says, this ain't no pussy shit.
We're going to come to that program. But, you know, you used the word performing. One of the things I thought about, people need to understand, when I did The Real World, the first season, 1992, I had already spent 4 years in college as a student leader and activist, absorbing all kinds of African, Afro-Caribbean, African history. You know, we had been involved in the anti-apartheid movement. We had done the racial profiling stuff and all the stuff y'all see today. This was going on in the 80s. Eleanor Bumpurs, Michael Stewart, Michael Griffith, all those things. The only difference now is that social media makes it look like, oh, it's, you know, no, this has always been going on. People think this is something new that's been happening. Black folks have always been killed by racists in this country.
Hello.
And so when I came to that show, one thing I was clear about is that I'm not going to perform in some stereotypical way for these white sisters and brothers. I'm not doing that. You know what I mean? I was very clear. It's MTV, but you know what? The most I'm interested in is maybe I'll get some speaking gigs out of it. That's about it. You know, I didn't care about hosting a show on MTV or anything like that. I was myself. But what I found out quickly, if you display anger, if you display strong opinions, the show's going to be edited in a certain kind of way, and you're going to be put into a certain kind of box. And for a good 2 or 3 years, I did come across the people as the quote-unquote angry black man, because what ends up happening, you're not allowed to be a whole human being. What was minimized was the fact that I was teaching at a Saturday program at New York University for high school students. What was minimized is that I was mentoring a young man during the course of the show, that I was in a partnership, that I was grappling with the issue of my father, I had showed my mother, all that kind of stuff. But the thing that got played up was the anger. And so it is sensationalistic. It's about ratings. And when people don't like the way you're quote-unquote performing, they will manipulate it to their benefit. Do you feel where I'm going with this?
Yeah.
You know, and then I ended up at Vibe magazine, not because of MTV. I want to make that very clear. I've been writing professionally since I was 20, 5 or 6 years before Vibe started. I literally came up in the black press as a black journalist, you know, Amsterdam News, City Sun, Afro-American newspaper. When I got to Vibe magazine, I was asked a simple question, you know, after the first issue, who do you want to write about? I said, the person I'm interested in is Tupac Shakur. Why was I interested in Tupac Shakur? Because I'm an activist. I came up in the black nationalist movement. The Shakur name is a name that is known in the movement. Mutulu Shakur, Assata Shakur, Afeni Shakur. You know what I mean? The first thing I got was, well, we never heard of him, and he's not that interesting, and is he really a star? Tupac got in trouble a couple months later with the police. The editors came back to me, and I talk about it in the book, are you still interested in that Tupac guy? Because now we get to cast Tupac as this crazy person, you know what I mean? And what I fought for was, you know what, this is a complex human being. This is a black man whose mother was in prison, literally across the street from this school, you know, while she was pregnant with him. And she got out just as he was being born, and he literally grew up in the movement, you know what I mean? And, you know, I saw someone who was a reader of books, someone who studied classical Shakespeare at the Baltimore School of the Arts, who was also a dancer. And I actually believe Tupac would have probably been a much greater actor than he ever was a rapper if he would have ever been able to grow and have the time to live past 25 years of life. But what I felt like is that, you know, when black males, be it myself, Tupac, or Cornell, represent any kind of threat to the status quo, there's this need to label them as crazy, as angry, as overly emotional. I'll bring it back to a recent example. I'm at the gym 2 weeks ago. I'm running the marathon in 3 weeks, y'all. I love running. I get my gym is empty. It's empty, right? I put my little water bottle on the treadmill. I put my headphone on the treadmill. I put my towel on the treadmill, and I just go about my business. I'm stretching, stuff like that, you know. My partner's here. I go talk to her for a little while, and I come back. An older white male walks by me when I finally get on the treadmill, and he actually said to me, yo, are you going to ever use that treadmill? And I was thinking to myself, man, I've been going to this gym for 20 years. And the gym represents one of the few safe spaces I have as a black man in this country, just to be able to have peace of mind and put my headphones on and not think about anything, right? And I was so angry, but I thought about it because, unfortunately, what you're talking about, you're not allowed to have all these emotions. Because the first thing I thought, man, I can get arrested if I step to this dude a certain kind of way. But I went up to him, and his white male, heterosexual white male arrogance was so disrespectful to me. I actually said to him some things I'm not going to repeat here. But it gets better. I took a step back. I went upstairs to talk to the black male manager. He's terrified because he's so used to his role, which is to make the white brothers and sisters in this majority white gym feel comfortable in Brooklyn Heights. And so I say, I need you to come down and have a conversation. Guess what the white male says to the black male about this black male? He's angry, clearly, and I'm going to call the police on him. And, you know, I haven't read Ta-Nehisi Coates' book, so I can't comment on that. But what I will comment on, you know, yes, I love everyone. I do see all of us as sisters and brothers. But that doesn't ignore the fact that I have a right to say as a black person, as an African person, that white supremacy and racism are alive and well in this country and on this planet, and I feel uncomfortable every single day of my life as a person of color. I don't know if I can get killed or marginalized or scapegoat or stereotyped every single day I walk out of my house. You know what I'm saying?
So why don't you stay home more? I'm not saying that as a joke, because in my last book that people hardly mention, Writing Beyond Racism, I really tried to argue, where do black people go?
Tupac said to me, when I said to him once, why don't you just, in an interview, I said, why don't you just be careful? You know what Pac said? There's no place called careful. You know, where do you go? You don't know. But
I think that that's why we have to see, and this goes back to gender and women, we have to see our homes as places of resistance.
I agree.
We have to look at our history and how much was started in the home.
That's right.
How much activism, Mary McLeod Bethune starting Bethune-Cookman College in her living room. Yeah. Because I think that part of the insane schizophrenia, and the root meaning of the word schizophrenia is brokenhearted, that black people live within, is we can even say, oh, imperialist, white supremacist, capitalist patriarchy. Then we'll be upset that a white person says something cruel to us, or we're left out of something because white people control it. So we're all of us sometimes living with this cognitive dissonance. Yeah. You know, a lot of times I have to say to myself, well, Bell Hooks, come on, I'm sorry. You've been writing the books. What do you expect? You know, when people who are racist are unkind, when people who are patriarchy, and patriarchy knows no gender, women can be as patriarchal. Why am I constantly surprised? But more, my people, as Zora Neale Hurston would say, why does it wound us? Why is our gaze so turned towards the master and the mistress that we can't turn it to ourselves and say, I believe that my home is the one place that I can make myself affirmed.
I agree.
You know, I tell people when I walk in my house, it's like two arms jump out and say, hold me and say, baby, you are here. This is where you belong. That's and deep. I think about the fact that I get pissed at things. Like I was getting pissed about all the attention to Black Lives Matter because I had read, I always get his name wrong, so I wrote it down today. Edward Gladys, is that how you say his name? You know? But he wrote this book that just came out, Democracy in Black, How Race Still Enslaves the American Soul. But the stories that he tells in that book are all about foreclosures and how many black women who have worked 20 and 30 years, how the police arrive in the dead of the night and put them out of their house because the mortgage that they own has been sold to the gangster bankers, and they finally, somebody comes, the police come, change the lock, and one woman talks about how much she had spent her life working to have this house that could house her, her children, her grandchildren. Right. The police come at 3 in the morning. They drill the lock off. They tell her, you got to get your shit out of here right now. And the point that she made is they had obviously been engaged in surveillance, because that's what fascism does. They had brought a cage for the dog, and they had a home for the dog. So she goes on and on about the shattering that did to her, that finding a home for the dog was important, but putting these black people, the little black children that witnessed this, out of their homes. I mean, so you should pay attention to who's losing their homes.
That's right.
And a lot of people that are losing their homes are our elder females.
That's right.
And they don't make good TV characters. You know, you don't get to drool over how it would be, ooh, I could fuck him, he's awfully cute. Or any of the stuff that goes on. Come on, don't act like you don't know that white people sit at home and gaze at the bodies of black people and engage in their own erotic fantasies. But elder black women are not people that anyone is saying, we need to care about these women.
Right.
We need to care about them losing where they live, ending up in indigent homes that, like my sister, my mother, people that I could provide places for them to go that wouldn't be awful, but they give their lives over to the patriarchy. You know, you always hated your son, but you give him power of attorney. So there's so much going on.
Wow. Yeah.
That we have to ask ourselves about gender and patriarchy.
As you know, my mother had 3 sisters and 1 brother, and the brother, the youngest, is the one who was always favored of all the girls, over the women, you know, by my grandmother. Yeah, and out of all the children, he probably is by far, and I hate to say this publicly, I mean, it is the truth though, failure in so many different ways, because I feel like we oftentimes enable this dysfunctional behavior amongst us as men, you know. On the one hand, it's this extreme of trying to protect, but the other side, we're not really being prepared, you know, to navigate this life.
But let's really talk about, we're not prepared. We have nothing in this culture that prepares young black boys to love themselves. No. You know, and I can't stand all the crap about little boys, be a man, you're the man of the house. You know, we are not interested in creating a healthy childhood for young black boys.
Yeah.
And until we do, I mean, I've spent a lot of time asking myself, because people really wanted me to come out strong against police brutality, and I was asking myself constantly, is police brutality the #1 problem for black male life? And then one of the things I kept reading is that black men are fast becoming the most illiterate group in our society. And I was thinking, wow, if you can't read or write by the time you're 10, you're on your way to prison or to death. Yeah. There's nothing else open for you. There's also so much joy. I mean, think about how much joy, Kevin, we've gotten from things we read. Yeah. It's a whole form of awakening. I mean, what got me out of the abusive patriarchal context? Reading.
Same here, yeah.
Critically thinking. Yeah. But if we deny black males that space, because remember again that Malcolm becomes a critical thinker in prison. That's right. Before that, he's just a jive dude, you know, running around, being sexually indiscriminate, using drugs, whatever, selling drugs. It's when he pauses and begins to critically examine himself and his life through the vehicle of Islam, but still, it's that moment that he becomes Malcolm X.
You know, it's interesting, because I'm just going to say this, Belle. I feel, having been involved in all this black male work for the last 25, 30 years, it's almost like big business to talk about the issue of black men and black boys. I know folks who have made a fortune, you know, as consultants, as advisors with their nonprofits, with these various campaigns. I mean, it's almost a joke to me, particularly when I know, because I've been to pretty much all 50 states in this country, every major city. I go to these communities where these young brothers are, and all these campaigns and all these initiatives are not reaching the folks they claim that they're supposed to be reaching. And so there's this black elite that we need to talk about, along with the white elite that exists, that basically is like a buffer to the power structure and the status quo. They don't really want to see us come up at all. It's actually big business to see us as dysfunctional as possible. I mean, I remember being at a conference in Florida a couple years back where the person before me, you had all black boys in the audience, and everything that this person said about the black boys in the audience, I was like, these boys should just die now. They're just doomed. You know what I'm saying? And I just feel like, you know, we need to all of us need to challenge this madness of, y'all know what I'm talking about. We don't have to say any names, this madness of caring about black boys when we don't. And then the part you're talking about, I see these rites of passages programs. A lot of them are bogus. You know, don't tell me that I'm an African king and, you know, I mean, I've heard it all because I've been a part of these things, man. You know what I'm saying? My name has been Kevin Powell, Kevin X, Kwesi, Kajati. I mean, come on, let's be real about it. You know, but at the end of the day, none of those conversations I was having until I encountered Bell and Pearl Cleek and everyone else actually talked about redefining black manhood.
Awesome. And I mean, and it's interesting to me that if you read the book, Kevin does talk about his violence against black women.
Yeah.
But when I met Kevin, he had, begun to deal with therapy, anger management. People would tell me, well, you shouldn't be promoting Kevin Powell because, he's been violent towards black women. And when I would say, but he has tried to confront his violence and make a change, I was so struck by how that didn't make any difference. It was like, let's be down on Kevin Powell. And I thought, this is the craziness, too, that when black men try to change, we don't affirm that effort to change, to be different. We want to keep you where you were 20 years ago.
But let's be clear, what I talk about in the book happened in 1991. It's now 2015. It's 24 years later. I actually had a black male in Brooklyn say to me, I'm never going to support any of your work because of what you've done in your past. And I said to him, you wouldn't even know what I did in my past if I didn't write about it and talk about it. He said, doesn't matter. Then I said, Bell, well, do you love Malcolm X? Yeah, man, Malcolm is the epitome of black manhood. You ain't no Malcolm X. I said, well, in the autobiography of Malcolm X, Malcolm smacked Sammy Pip's woman, and did all kinds of foul stuff to women. But he's your hero. And so I also feel like, we appreciate somebody that's dead, but we don't even want to see folks trying. Like, I believe, DJ Reborn, one of my sisters said to me once, unless someone is absolutely egregious in their behavior and is not making an effort at all, because what I remember, and it's ironic, I got to say this, it was Sam Anderson, an older black man who was the first head of diversity program here at the New School, Eugene Lane College, 24 years ago. I came to him and said what I had just done. He didn't condemn me. He was one of the first father figures I had, a black male, and he embraced me. He actually pointed me toward my first black woman therapist, and, actually helped to point me towards some communities that could be supportive of my journey, because I realized all I had ever dealt with was racism. I hadn't even thought about sexism. It wasn't even a consideration, because, I think if we're going to condemn black males or black boys, black men and black boys for being violent, then we should condemn the violence and the patriarchy of black male leadership that perpetuates this from generation to generation. It doesn't even set up a context for us to have any kind of real conversation that you're talking about around how we grow and heal as men.
Or how about the many conversations I've had about Cosby where people tell me, well, that was a long time ago. Or, that the refusal to see sexual violence against women and girls as criminal, as damaging, as traumatic. And it's really been shocking to me, because a lot of the people that, in my world that have been the Cosby supporters have been women.
Oh, yeah.
And it's tied into our envy, hatred of white women, because so many of those women were white. It's like there's a mood that feels like, well, if they had stayed away from black men, they wouldn't be suffering.
Wow. And
not like, why do we want any woman to be suffering?
No one should suffer
at the hands of male violence.
No
exactly.
one. No one.
So, as we begin to close, I would like you to talk about how you come to your feminist consciousness. Because, see, that's what people don't understand, that when I met you, what impressed me was the transformation of your consciousness. Not that you, even though I did respect your being able to be open about violence, but it was the other work on your mind, on how do I perceive women, what do I expect from women, what do I hope for?
Yeah. There's a few things I say I do a lot of workshops with fraternities. I belong to a fraternity, a lot of athletes, and men in general. First thing I say is you have to own your patriarchy. You have to own your sexism. I think, and that's the hardest thing for us to do. I remember last year I was at a very elite college. I'm not going to say the name of it, but I was in a group of 11 fraternities over the course of 2 weeks, every night. And I asked them some basic questions, Belle. I said, well, what's a man? Y'all know what they said: accountable, responsible, all these different things, leader, etc. By the time they were done, I said, well, you just described my single mother. Now, can you tell me what a man is? Second thing, I asked them a simple question. Can you tell me 5 to 10 women in American and world history that you have a working knowledge of? No one could answer the question beyond Rosa Parks, Betsy Ross, Hillary Clinton, a few other women. Do you see where I'm going with this? It was ignorance. And the reason why I was brought into this school to deal with the issue of patriarchy is because this school, one of the top schools in this country, has such a horrific track record around the sexual assault of women on that campus that women on that campus actually wrote an open letter saying, we do not feel safe even associating with these fraternities, you know? And these men, in spite of admitting they had no idea what a man was, they could not talk articulately about the contributions of women and girls to world history. At the same time, they were pushing back hard. Well, she was there, so I was going to have sex with her. Not even understanding what the word consent meant. You know what I mean? So for me, you can't get to a quote-unquote feminist consciousness if you're not willing to take ownership as a man and understand that we are beneficiaries of privilege and power. And that includes black males.
Absolutely, and that is has been one of our hardest things to teach because, and that's why I'm a little bit suspicious of all the focus on black males right now and racism in terms of its obscuring of gendered power that black men hold.
That's right.
And the fact that it makes people feel like, well, you know, you're not caring about the brother if you start talking about.
That's BS.
Yeah, the patriarchal. You know, what's up with that?
Yeah, it's insanity. You know, to me, as an activist, if I can use that language for a second, Belle, I feel, well, we always say, how can you talk about oppression and then you turn around and be an oppressor yourself? You know what I mean? And you shouldn't be opposed to oppression that's convenient for you, then you act like nothing else exists. I mean, you talk about, you've done it in your 40 books at this point? Is it 40, 30 something?
Yeah.
You know, the intersection of all these different things. For me, where I'm at now as a human being, I think about race, I think about gender, I think about class, I think about sexual identity, I think about the disabled community, I think about, you know, spiritual freedom, religion, whatever you want to call it, but I think about the intersection of these things. But as a black man, you know, I have a responsibility to listen to the voices. That's one of the things I say. You have to listen to the voices of women and girls. And, you know, bringing it back to my mother, yes, there was a dichotomy there, and there was a lot of anger there and a lot of back and forth, but the common thread through this book is my mother. It starts with my mother, and it ends with my mother. And the thing I think about is my mother always talked about how men were no good. You know what I mean? Or don't be like your father. Now, she wasn't able to articulate specifically other than he just, you know, left. But I realized she was saying to me in her own way, her own backwoods of South Carolina way, which is genius to me, you know, you've got to find an alternative definition of manhood. You know what I'm saying? And I just think that and you have to respect women and girls as your equals, as your equals, as your equals. You got to do everything in your power. If you talk about feminist consciousness as a man, it really sums it up. Women and girls are my equals, period.
But if you're that man, my brother, and his buddies that have been told you're not worth a nickel, where is the space where you will begin to interrogate? I mean, I just tried to get my brother would always say, well, there's this girl at work. And I was like, excuse me, are we talking about a child? Or are we talking about an adult woman?
The language we use.
And just on that level, he was just so hostile and resentful, like, you trying to check me, but I don't mean no harm by it, you know. And I said, well, Ken, when those white men at work, if they say to you, boy, come on over here.
That's right.
And do such and such. He can see that as a form of diminishing domination. But he can't see it when he's doing it in terms of calling a woman who's older than you a girl.
That's right.
You know, and just trying to think about, you know, what is your relationship? I mean, I'm interested in black men and black people and love. And what is our relation to becoming people who can love?
Wow.
Because I think love is the only answer to the violence.
I agree.
You know, however much we can talk about police brutality, we in this room know that a significant danger to black men is other black men, not necessarily through killing you, but through saying that you're nothing.
Yeah.
You know, I'm always teaching people, like, if you have a black male child and you're telling him every single day of his life that he's stupid, I mean, what are you creating?
Yeah.
And then, you know, when he acts out, you're pondering, well, like, why is he acting out?
Yeah.
And not really seeing that connection between the traumatic abuse, verbal abuse, that we often plunge black boys into, that doesn't get talked about. I mean, why isn't T.D. Jakes? I mean, I've been asking people like, oh, did you see the war room? And I said, why do I want to have a damn room in my house called a war room where I go to be with God? You know,
that's
why don't I want a
reinforced.
sacred space
Right.
that is healing and
That's right.
love-filled?
That's right.
But I see in my world, which is Appalachia, predominantly white, standing room only. The white folks are there. You know, those are the same, you know, rebel flag white folks, the same haters, but they're there at this movie that's all black people because it's still the same colonizing Christianity.
That's right.
The war room. And so many black people that I know to be smart say, well, Belle, but it's just so moving. And I was like, well, I don't even want to go there. It's just like Straight Outta Compton. You know, I don't even want to go there. I don't care how entertaining.
Right.
I'm fed up.
Right.
With images of black women that are diminished and degraded.
Yeah.
I'm fed up with black men who don't want to be degraded themselves, but who create degrading images of black women.
That's right.
And so I'm not interested.
Yeah.
But it is also, then you ask yourself, I asked myself before we were to talk, what are black men without their rage? If black male rage is the only thing that gives black men any visibility whatsoever. Because even Ta-Nehisi Coates is trying to pass himself, and maybe that isn't fair, Belle, you know, but he is trying to articulate his rage. So we get the sense that even the black man who's made it, you know, in the white world, he's still being driven by his rage. Or is that because the only voice of black masculinity, the imperialist, white supremacist, capitalist patriarchy is willing to hear is the voice of rage? And that, what are the other voices? I mean, I think all the time about our poets like Langston Hughes and Warren Cooney. You know, she does not know her beauty.
Yeah.
She thinks her brown body has no glory.
Yeah.
And you contrast those poems that came out of a loving black maleness with what comes at us today. And there isn't any love. Last year for my birthday, I always have people come over on my birthday and recite a poem. I asked people to bring a love poem. The love poems were so violent, whether from male or female, that it was just like depressing. I was like, I'll never do this again. But it just made me wonder about how we conceptualize love.
Yeah.
How we conceptualize that we don't even think black males and males in general are capable of honesty.
You know, something you said, was it your grandfather, your father's father, who was a peaceful man and your father was resentful to that?
My mother's father.
Your mother's father. I want to be a man and a black man who is about peace and love. It's real simple to me now. And I feel like it takes work. You have to have a critical consciousness around gender issues. And I feel that you have to be open to evolving for the rest of your life, and you have to be a practitioner of it, you know. And I think you have to do it even when you don't see other folks around you engaging in it, you know. I actually admire my male friends, no matter what their race, but black men specifically, who are even able to say, I love you, brother. It's no big deal. Or we're able to hug each other without an arm in the middle of us, you know what I'm saying? You know, the homophobia kicks in and, you know, let me just put this arm in the middle because I don't want the brother. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, if you love someone, right? You know, but I mean, as you're talking, I'm thinking about Kendrick Lamar because for me, as a lifelong hip-hop head, honestly, I don't know how what you feel about him, but for me, when I listen to his lyrics, I hear semblances of Tupac. At least there's vulnerability there. You know, Kendrick is a young artist. I don't know where he's going to go. I also admire the fact that he said, I'm going to marry this woman that I love, and I don't care what people think, and I'm loyal to her. And he's 27 years old saying this as a black man, you know.
We should open it up for short questions. Say your name, be loud. Don't give a speech. If you try with loving kindness, I will ask you to be silent. Yes? Atlanta. Atlanta is one of the biggest cities for black people foreclosures. Yeah. Oh, they can.
Oh, yeah, they can.
The gangsters can do what they want with their property. Your name?
Oh.
No, the young man young woman who's trying to speak, right? Yes. Yes.
Ian, I was just interested if you both could talk about, I think when we have conversations about black masculinity, and even in this one, I think there's been a bit of an erasure as far as talking about queer blackness, and especially in relation to the father relationship between queer black men and their fathers. particularly in this, when we are seeing such an immense attack on the trans Black community.
Can I jump in here because I'm Lamar, and I had thoughts about this too because I did not have, I didn't grow up with a Black father, and I wasn't mourning that. And I think that the story for many queer Black men is not a mourning of an absence of a Black male figure. In a way, it's a celebration because there's a different kind of embrace of the mother. Now, I'm not saying that Black queer men are not patriarchal because, of course, they are. But there's a different embrace of their Black mother, I think, and there's a different relationship to that. So it's the same.
I don't think we can make those kind of holistic statements, though, because a lot of queer Black men have been beaten and put down by Black mothers, especially because they appeared queer.
Right.
Or they were perceived to be on the road to being queer. I mean, just recently I wanted to give one of my little nephews a teddy bear, and my grandniece was like, "You're going to make him gay." And the violence, you know, he had asked for this little teddy bear, but the violence against him, even then, you know, you're 5 years old. So I don't know that we can make those kind of blanket statements. I can say that the Black men who have given me love, healthy love, have pretty much all been queer Black men. Essex Hempel, Marlon Riggs, but they've been queer Black men with awareness, with critical awareness and critical thinkers. And so that has been an oversight in our conversation, but I don't think we can act like queer men represent an anti-patriarchal group. I'm glad you weren't. I wouldn't want to have to. Can I
respond?
No.
Can I respond really quick? Can I respond really quickly?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Belle. I figured since I was here. Thank you. I'm glad you raised the question. One of the things I talk about in my book, just like Belle said, you know, there were queer brothers along the way who were very instrumental in my development, and it was very important for me to talk about it in my book. And I apologize for not bringing it up in this conversation because it's something that I felt I had to acknowledge and also to challenge people around their homophobia, you know what I mean? And not just queer brothers. You know, the first editor-in-chief I had at Vibe magazine who gave me the opportunity was an openly gay white brother, you know what I'm saying? And so there are allies there, and I consider myself an ally to the queer community for so many different reasons. And when I talk about being against oppression, I'm talking about all forms of oppression. That's very important to me. There's no way I could sit here and talk as a heterosexual or so-called straight Black male about my own situation and not having empathy for the things and the challenges that your community or people in the queer community go through. That's very important to me, and I have to say that publicly.
I noticed, however, how many times he said he was a straight Black man.
I was making a point, actually.
Your name, sweetheart? Yes?
I don't project well. My name is Sharon Johnson. I'm actually an alumna of the Media Studies program here. And I just wanted to mention an Inglewood, California-based poet named Peter J. Harris, Black man. And he wrote a book called Black Man of Happiness, Poems.
That's right.
And
I don't know it.
He talks about how it actually had to be a conscious sort of pushback for him to write these poems about being happy as a Black man, because the only emotion that we ever see.
And I think that's why so many of the few liberated Black men are gay, because they have given themselves permission to be emotionally aware and emotionally intelligent. And that has yet to happen in any kind of movement of straight Black men. Your name?
I wanted to ask you in this moment to talk about your relationship with Belle. I wanted to ask you in this moment to talk about your relationship with Belle in your awareness, because it seems that could be a lot of Belles out there for some Black men who don't get the chance to actually answer when a woman asks them a question about who they are.
Wow.
One, he listens when I critique him.
Yes, ma'am.
But I don't think we should laugh at that, because a lot of us who have been beaten and hit by Black men, it comes when you're trying to make some kind of critique. And it's like, bitch, what makes you think you can critique me or tell me what to do? And how many of us saw that as children with mothers who tried to stand up and be righteous to patriarchy?
Yeah.
So that, you know, I was trying to think if we'd ever had a conflict, you and I, but I don't think so.
I sought out Belle. I don't know if you remember this. I read her work in early 90s, and then when I got to Vibe magazine, you know, I knew I had to write about hip-hop artists, but at some point I was like, I got to write about some other folks. And you remember I did an interview with you. It was one that we called it the Vibe Q. It might have been the very first one. And it was really important for me to just sit down with this woman that I had been reading and to ask her questions. And that led to me, when you were living in the West Village, I would come to her house and sit on the floor and just listen, you know, because I wanted her to be a mentor. I wanted to learn, you know. It was really important to me. And one of the things Belle said to me, if you remember this, it's like, it's cool that you're hanging out with women, but you now have to have these conversations with other men. That was critical. You know what I mean? And I took that seriously. Like, you have to have these conversations. And I believe you also said to me that men will listen to men very differently than they will listen to women because of the patriarchy.
I also think that listening is counter-hegemonic, because most of us are not involved with men, whether they're fathers, brothers, neighbors, or whatever. I have bought a lot of real estate because I believe we got to get our money straight. Girl, get your money straight. And I was telling somebody recently, you know how you have those light bulb moments of awareness. I was like, wow, when I left my abusive ex, I thought I walked out of the arms of patriarchy. But then when I walked into real estate, I walked right back into the arms of patriarchy without the fringe benefits. No sex, no companionship, just men telling me what I should think, what I should do, discounting what I'm saying. And I think about that, women, because a lot of times we don't seize control over our housing because the people that do work still tend to be men, and that you have to interface with them. If you're black and you live in a predominantly white area, you've got to interface with white workmen who give you no respect. And these things are very real around the question of masculinity. I believe that I have a white man that I trust who's my handyman. When I have to deal with other white men, I take him along. Because I have found that white racist cruelty likes to take place best in secrecy, so that the things people will say to you or do to you, and that, I mean, black women, and all women, I have to say, I don't think we should do things alone. I think we should just be like black men. Let's learn some survival strategies from black men. Run in packs. You know, I go to the doctor with another woman because I've seen what the white medical establishment has done to the bodies of black women. And I can tell you, I even go with my friend Jane, who's a white woman, but the doctors get very angry because you brought somebody to be a witness, and their power is immediately diffused because everything is not taking place in secret. And I think that those things are very crucial to us in what are the spaces of our everyday lives where we interface with patriarchy, because as a single black woman, no sex in quite a few years, I don't interface, I feel, in my intimate life with patriarchy very much. It's in the practical stuff of life where I have to interact, usually with the rot gut patriarchy, you know, not academic men who've learned to cover up their shit, but I mean the men who feel like there's nothing a woman has to tell them about how the plumbing might work, about how we might fix something, et cetera, et cetera.
How do you, women who have to deal with women who've internalized the patriarchy, what is your advice to them who have to deal with women who are in positions of power or leadership and are acting out the way a male figure would act out? Well,
it's like I was somewhere with Gloria Steinem, and people were saying to me, well, what do you think of Hillary? And she went on and on about how wonderful Hillary is, how she's changed and she's grown. And then they said, well, Belle, what do you think of Hillary? And I said, well, I think she embodies the very best of white supremacist, imperialist, capitalist patriarchy. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't vote for her. She may be our best person, and the fact is, she can be all those things, as Obama has been many things that we don't agree with. At the same time, it has been an intervention to have a black male president. I mean, to what extent that, you know, everywhere I go when the election first happened, people are like, oh, do you think this is going to change black men's lives? And I was like, well, representation matters, but it can only matter so much. You know, I think that had Obama really taken seriously reaching out to black men, we would be in awe of him. He would be beyond a Malcolm, beyond a King. It would be like, you know, our prince has arrived because he is really addressing the concerns of black men. But the imperialist, white supremacist, capitalist patriarchy weren't even going to let him address the concerns of black men. If anything, he had to always act like, I can't really think about black men because I represent everybody. And I think that that kind of devaluation of black masculinity did not mean that his presidency had the revolutionary effect that many people thought that it would have. And I have to just come down on, I enjoyed seeing the Black Panthers, Vanguard of the Revolution, but there is tremendous sexism in that film, and I am puzzled by how the media, the mind-fucking media, has suddenly talked about it as a feminist film, and the women in the film. Angela Davis is not in the film. There's not even an image of her in the film.
None. Fanny Shakur's not in it as well.
And then Eric, what's the woman? Taste of Power.
Elaine Brown was actually the first chairperson of the Panther Party, but that's not in the film.
And she asked for her part to be taken out of the film.
Right.
But if you look at the New York Times, all the reviews of it have been exploiting it. Again, who are they addressing? Oh, the feminism. They're addressing white women who are the major book buyers in our society, who are the people in the family that choose the film to go to. And so suddenly this really rot gut sexist film, which again doesn't mean you shouldn't see it because it has powerful images of the Black Panther Party and certainly the feeding the children stuff. But at the same time, why is this distortion happening so that once again the bodies of black women become the playing field where you can throw out something to us that is rotten at its core, but make it seem like, oh yeah, this is all about black women. This is all about all the work that they did. And that is always, I don't know, sometimes it just feels everywhere we turn lately, we're being presented with some emperor in new clothes bullshit where something is being presented to us. Like, I mean, in Elle magazine this month, Shonda Rhimes, all talking about her feminism. Really, Shonda? Have you looked at Empire lately? You know, have you looked at Scandal and analyzed it? So feminism becomes nothing. If feminism is everything to anybody, then it's nothing. Then the kind of struggle that has to take place when we confront patriarchy is completely obscured. I'm sorry I went on so long. Another question? Your name?
Isaac. 17.
Isaac is 17? And he's serious about it.
Hello. All right. My question is, I noticed that Kevin, when he said he sat in on your meetings, he said that you told him to go out and talk to other males about you know, what was going on in the meetings. My question is, like, how do you do that when males today, like, they're just so narrow-minded, they're stuck in like their role in society today. So like how can you transform that like within like a 5 to 10 minute conversation? Because you know people want to go, people want to leave. You know, like, you can't really have someone standing there for such a long time.
That's deep. 17. I was not thinking about that at 17.
Sometimes I think you can just give a soundbite.
I agree.
You know, like when everybody was trying to get me to talk about the white woman who was passing for black, I said, a sociopath raised by sociopaths. That.
And she drops the mic.
Yes. I mean, and that's that. We don't always. Sometimes we can educate people just by one sentence. I mean, think about those of you in this room. I know I'm always collecting quotes from people that have just changed my life. I mean, or made me think like differently. Like, you know, I was reading something today that said, if love is present, there is no fear. Yeah. And if fear is present, there is no love. Yeah. And then I made that my meditation because we all want to think that we can be loving even as we hold on to all this toxic energy and toxic stuff.
That's right.
And so I don't think that you have to have long conversations. I think you have to have strategic conversations where, you know, the one thing that you say. Like this man came up to me at a talk I gave, and he was like, "Oh, you don't remember me? I had a crush on you in the 5th grade, and I gave you, you know, a little necklace and a ring, and you gave me a notebook and a pen." And
It started back then.
so I was like, I found this brother really interesting. He'd read my books. But then when I started, you know, because I'm the single woman looking for love, I was like, well, how's the family? Where's the family? My sisters live in Louisville. And I was like, okay, the wife? Oh, we're divorced. But then it turned out as the night went on, the man wasn't divorced, you know. And it's like, do you need to have a deep discussion about that? Do you need to do, I mean, some kind of patriarchal consciousness raising? I mean, it may be enough just to say, you know, I don't want to deal with brothers who lie or manipulate. Yeah. I'm over that. Yeah. And you can just say that. I mean, I have to say Buddhism taught me that, that I don't have to be angry with people to be clear. That I can, with loving kindness, say to somebody, you know, I've been through that. That's not something I want to go through anymore. Yeah. And that's, so for you, I mean, you have to think of the things you can say that are short. You know, even if you were just saying, if somebody is talking about banging a woman's pussy hard, whatever, you can just say,
that's mad real, y'all. That's real. People talk like that.
I don't want to do that. I'd rather tell the woman in my life how much I care about her body. That's a sentence.
That's it.
But that sentence might make somebody think. You know, a last question. Yes, your name?
Can we give you the mic?
I'm in the process of developing a program for young men in Newark, and one of the topics, Brick City. So one of the topics is deconstructing these ideas that are hypermasculine, that have these sort of connotations. And I know that, Kevin, you've been through a process, right? And you've been through this, you know, thing. And I'm wondering, how do I translate that to these young guys? They're all African-American, they're 6th graders. And how do we have sort of these age-appropriate conversations that really deconstruct these ideas?
You want to respond first?
You go ahead.
I think we should lose the term age-appropriate first. I just think we got to start. I wish that I was being talked to about patriarchy and sexism when I was 5 years old. Because what did I experience between the ages of 5 and 10? If you want to grow a mustache, young boy, you go out there and get you a woman. And you know the derogatory stuff we say about women. What was I taught between the ages of 5 and 10? Go into the school and grab girls' body parts. This is what we were doing, you know. The reason why
he's doing that because he likes you.
Yeah.
That was our socialization.
Yeah.
When you're saying, I don't like it when Johnny touches me. No doubt that boy that gave me the necklace.
Yeah.
I can't resist. I don't think we can have revolution without humor.
I agree.
Because if we take ourselves too seriously, we can't deal.
I totally agree with you. I think we have to have those conversations. I mean, think about what we're talking about. It's 2015. I know what I knew at 10, 11 years old. I mean, anyone from the hood out there grew up poor? You know, we were told if you're 10 years old in the hood, you probably need to add 5 to 10 years to that because you've experienced stuff. And I know what I experienced by the time I was 10 years old, stuff I probably had no business seeing. Am I right, y'all? And now with social media, I mean, come on. All you got to do, I mean, World Star, YouTube, I mean, everything is out there. And I just, to his question, the 17-year-old young man's question, you just talk directly. When I work with young males, I did a workshop around Straight Outta Compton. I knew I was going in there to talk about deconstructing racism and sexism, you know what I mean? But I let them talk. I get it out your system. You know what they were talking about? Man, when Eazy-E jumped from one roof to the other, and he was selling drugs and da-da-da, and when Ice Cube this and Dre that, they said all that stuff. They used the N-word about 1,000 times in 10 minutes. You know what I'm saying? These are 15, 16-year-olds, you know? And once that was done, I asked a simple question. Where did the N-word even come from? No one knew. I said, who created hip-hop? Tupac and Biggie, son. That's who created hip-hop. They actually said that, Belle. And I said, Tupac and Biggie created hip-hop, huh? And what happened to them? They dead, son. So they created it and they got killed. Yeah, who killed them? The Illuminati and Suge Knight. You said bring some humor into this, right? And so my responsibility then was to, let me break this down for y'all. You know what I mean? every generation has defended the use of this word. I don't tell people how to talk, you know what I mean? But here's where this word came from, number one. And then let me contextualize to you where hip-hop came from. Working class, African-American, West Indian, and Latino people created hip-hop. Poor people created hip-hop. You know what I'm saying? And they're looking, because these kids were from Harlem and the Bronx. I'm like, y'all created this. Y'all were the B-boys, B-girls. Y'all were the rappers, the MCs. Y'all were the DJs. Y'all were the graffiti writers, you know? And then I started asking them, well, what do you want to do? And unfortunately, Belle, as you know, we talk about black men, Latino men, men in our community, in our color, in our communities. There's three things we aspire to when we don't see any examples out there. And I got to throw this out there to men out there. Like, part of the reason why a lot of our young boys only want to be rappers, ball players, and hustlers, because that's all they see on a regular basis in our communities. You know what I'm saying? And I'm disgusted with these black churches that have all these men ministries, and these dudes ain't nowhere in the hoods anywhere in this country. You know what I mean? To me, they're spitting in the face of Dr. King and Malcolm. We forget Dr. King's Poor People's Campaign. We forget what Malcolm represented, all these folks out there. These brothers are out there by themselves. And so it's important that we connect with them, let them speak. Just let them speak and get it out. And then our responsibility, you know, one of my fraternity brothers says it best, Lasana Hotep from LA, from California. He said the most important thing you can do if you're really serious about helping your community is be prepared. So you got to have a working knowledge of history, you know, of current events, of pop culture, of technology. You got to know hip-hop. You got to know video games. You got to know sports. You got to know everything, in my humble opinion, in these times if you're trying to relate to young people. And in this case, young black men. I think that's critical. And then we got to challenge them, because these same young boys I'm talking about that were using the N-word very loosely, every other word out their mouth was B-I-T-C-H. I mean, these are 15-year-old boys. Even when I was 15, even with my sexist behavior as a 15-year-old boy, we didn't call girls B-I-T-C-H's to their faces or behind their backs. But because of the commodification and commercialization and the co-optation and the destruction of hip-hop culture, it's been turned into the industry. It's everywhere. So, and the school system is so bankrupt. You know what we're learning in the school system? Nada, nothing. And so the mass media culture is how they're learning, and it gets reinforced over and over again. So they really believe that they're nothing more than NIGGAs and that women and girls are nothing more than BITCHs. But I agree with Belle. You can't critique hip-hop or black men specifically or only. It's the whole society that's patriarchal and sexist and all these different things. You know, hip-hop simply is the face of it today. You know what I mean? And so I think we got to be aware of all this stuff, and we got to challenge them. And then I think we got to have them participate in, well, what is a new definition of manhood mean? Like, how would you define manhood? What kind of man do you want to be? And like Belle said, I think that it's not too early to introduce the word love. Love, love, love. Ras Baraka is the mayor of Newark, New Jersey right now. Go back and listen to the Miseducation Lauryn Hill album from 1998. The teacher on the album is Ras Baraka. You know what I mean? And he's asking those students about love. Y'all remember the album, right? And bringing it back to all these intersections, you know, to my queer sisters and brothers, Ras's sister, Shawnee, 10 years ago, and her partner, queer sisters were murdered by the father, the husband of the older sister, and the husband happened to be an activist and a community leader practicing the most vicious and vile kind of patriarchy. And I remember at the funeral how Ras broke down crying because Shawnee, his sister, was the youngest of them. He said she was the best of us all. And it forced all of us, myself included. Someone asked where did the feminist conscience came from? Some of it comes from experiences like that, where you see these two queer women being murdered simply because they were queer by a straight man, because he's so insecure in some distorted definition of manhood. Not only do I hate myself, I'm going to hate you and kill you as well. So I think we got to talk about all these things if we're going to talk about with these kids. It's never too early, in my opinion, because we don't want them to grow up to be monsters, because they become sexist, rapists, mass shooters, all those different things if we don't start when they're 10 years old, when they're 15 years, when they're 17 years old. You know what I mean? And that's the work that some of us end up doing. You know, this is the work that we do now, where we're trying to stem the tide of all this stuff. And I wish this was here years ago. I wish we had these conversations years ago.
And we got to stop acting like patriarchy is what will heal black men.
Right.
Oh, just a little more patriarchy. Just a woman that you can dominate. I mean, it makes me sad to all the beautiful young women that come into my life that are being abused on some level verbally or physically by boyfriends who feel like they have no choice, that if they want to be heteronormative, they have to be in these spaces where they can't show how smart they are, they can't make a decision because they don't want to undermine And so we've also got to talk about where do we go for different kinds of images.
That's right.
You know, that's why, I mean, I was headed to Straight Outta Compton. I had to stop myself because we all are oftentimes entertained by self-hating bullshit and that we can find it enjoyable.
That's right.
So again, I urge you to read this book, Unhooked, because we are also, you know, black people, we are addicted to white supremacy, to living out. It's just like, I hate to get on the brother, but the brother said to me, ooh, you still got that good hair. And I thought to myself, delete, you know, because those are the values of white supremacy, and we're always sharing them with other black people.
If you have hair, you got good hair. Seriously, no matter what your hair is.
We want to give a shout out, thank you, to Eugene Lang. I want to really thank Kevin because I think it takes courage as a black man. I am so proud of all the black men who are writing memoirs. I wanted to talk to Harry Belafonte because in his new memoir, he actually critiques his womanizing ways and talks about going to psychoanalysis. And I don't think we have enough black men who talk about seeking help in therapy.
It saved my life. I'm clear about that.
And so I urge us all to buy the memoirs of black males or go to the library because we want to have more black males have the courage. You know, I asked Kevin, what does his mother think? Because it's a harsh portrait of her that he paints and of their life. You know, a lot of times our parents don't want, they feel like you're a success.
Can I answer that?
Yes, sir, hurry up. I was trying to bring us to a close.
Okay. As an artist, as a writer, I just feel like we have to be responsible to tell our truths. I mean, we've got to be about healing. It's real simple.
I know my sister was telling me, well, if you would stop talking about the past, maybe you could get it together. And I was like, really? And maybe if you would start talking about the past, you would ask yourself, why am I with a husband that's constantly putting me down? Wow. I mean, because it's only as we do the work of healing that we can come to self-love. Yeah. And I think it's bull to act like, oh, you can just love yourself. You have to do the work. That's right. And the work may mean going into your past, looking at the messages that you received, and reflecting on how do I get those messages. My therapist always says, and I share this bit of therapy knowledge with you, don't look at what people say, look at what they do. Yeah. But then she'll ask me a lot, what's wrong with this picture? Like when I used to want to go over to the cruel ex's apartment, and I would say, well, I just want to go over there. I just want to see him. She said, well, fine, go over there, but don't think you're going over to love. Be clear about the action that you're taking. And ask yourself, what's wrong with this picture? Think about how many times you in this room have turned away from the love or the good to chase after the bad, the exciting, the reckless, because that's what we do with our wounded selves. As Maya Angelou says, and we close, herself an alcoholic that never seemed to do anything about it, is never lonely in Babylon.
Wow.
Because you can always find some toxic folks to hang out with. Mm. And we thank you, Kevin. We thank you for your courage.
Thank you, Belle.
And sharing your story.
Thank you.
And we look forward to all of you black men.
Can I, please take a postcard for the book, and please pre-order and spread the word, and please support Belle's work. I mean, again, her work has been transformative for me, and I know it will be for all of you. So Belle, thank you so much. I love you.
Ladies and gentlemen, one more time, can we thank these two phenomenal folks for sharing their stories and their lives and their life with us. You can catch Belle tomorrow in conversation. Right back here at 6:30, and tomorrow, and Wednesday, and Thursday.